Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My special guest, the Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. Jared, great seeing you.
Hey, Aaron, it's great to see you.
And Gia, too.
She's at First Pup Gia is her Instagram account. So
Gia, I already know you have more followers than I do, but it's great to see you again, too. So, Jared, I'm just really interested. I mean, when you become governor, obviously things change over time, sometimes in a matter of days or months. But what surprised you the most about being governor so far?
First of all, we just have an amazing state. But, for me, I'd spent the last 10 years as a legislator. Before that, I was in business as an executive. It's more like the business experience because it's more like you're running the executive agency of government. You have a role in the legislative process, and interestingly enough, that seems to be the piece that people, including the press, are most interested in. Like, what did you sign? But that's just such a small part of the job. It's really about having a great cabinet, which are the senior executives that run each agency. We have 30,000 employees at the state of Colorado, so we're always challenging people to say, what can you do more efficiently? How can you deliver services better? How can we cut red tape and make it easier to get licenses or permits? So we're always asking those questions internally. So it's exciting to be back on that executive and management side.
What, since you've become governor, what have you learned that's changed your perspective on an issue or anything of substance?
Well, the job has a lot of highs and lows. So, after the STEM school shooting, the next day visiting the kids in the hospital, going to Kenrick Castillo's funeral, a lot of highs as well, like being able to achieve, free full-day kindergarten. And so, a lot of ups and downs, and you really live with the spirit of the state. So, when the state has the cyclone blizzard and, we're in a disaster mode, we lost a state trooper that day, and then other days that are great and that we're focused on celebrating our state. I was just at the State Fair in Pueblo as an example, celebrating ag in our state.
What about, one of the things you and I have talked about multiple times is just kind of the toxic environment in politics and how it's certainly, since you were first elected, it's certainly gotten a lot worse. Any thoughts about what we can do about that? And, certainly we've contrasted Colorado with Washington historically in a real positive way, but a lot of that seems to be seeping into the state.
It's true. It's a real challenge as governor because what you strive to do every day as governor is be a governor for everybody, right? The 43% that didn't vote for me, I want to focus on being their governor too, right? So how do their kids benefit from kindergarten, from saving money on health care? We announced that rates are going down 18% in the individual market in insurance. But there's this fundamental factor where folks just, it seems like, don't really trust their elected officials. They don't understand that most, by and large, Republicans and Democrats, they get elected, they work hard, they're doing their best. Doesn't always measure up. You can't always agree on every issue. But with very few exceptions, I've been impressed by the quality of our elected officials in Colorado, county leadership, state legislators, and they're, whether you disagree with them or agree with them, they're generally doing what their constituents want. And the truth is, constituents in different part of the state often want different things, right? Somebody in a 75% Democratic district in Denver might have a different vision from the state than somebody from Eastern Plains with 75% Republican. But it doesn't mean anybody is less Coloradan or less patriotic. And that's kind of the piece that we have to get over as we have these authentic discussions about where we head as a state.
When you look at all the challenges that the state and the nation face, are there one or two issues that rise to the top in terms of greatest concern, of yours or of greatest importance?
Well, I'm very concerned with these trade wars, Aaron. These are a really sabotaging the economy, completely unnecessary and just doing it ourselves. It's like President Trump is just stabbing our economy in the foot over and over again, and there's just no reason for it. So, whether it's China, whether it was blowing up NAFTA with Mexico and Canada, these are huge amounts of uncertainty, but they also cost real Colorado jobs. I hear from companies all the time that if these tariffs move forward, are already considering or have faced layoffs and cutbacks because of reductions in sales. It also is really a regressive tax because a tariff means that you're paying more for your shirt, your socks, your shoes, at Walmart or wherever you shop.
Well, and what's your reaction to the fact that the president keeps saying that tariffs are great and China's paying us lots of money for them?
Well, I don't think he has a deep understanding of economics. Economists on the right and the left would, in fact, agree that tariffs are a detriment to prosperity, because when, by its very definition, in economics, a trade leaves both parties better off. They are both willing partners and they have an exchange of goods or services. They both emerge from that transaction better off. So inhibiting that trade through artificial taxes in the form of tariffs is simply bad economics. And that's not conservative or liberal bad economics. You know, it's just bad economics.
So one of the things I want to talk about are several things. You've had a number of really great successes in your first year in the General Assembly. But looking ahead, before we go to some of those successes, if you could get one bill passed by the General Assembly, is there one at the top of your list? And I know you have a long list, knowing you, but is there one that rises to?
Is there one? You know, I mean, we worked on a lot. Obviously, healthcare, saving people money was a big priority. We got much of that done. We're hoping to pilot a prescription drug importation program from Canada, working with the Trump administration and Secretary Azar on that. Reinsurance, which will save 18.2% at least on the exchange, more in Western Colorado for all the individual insurance, free full-day kindergarten. We want to continue to expand preschool access. We added about 5,000 preschool slots this year to make sure that all kids get a strong start. And then we want to continue our efforts to lower the income tax rate. It's 4.63%. We would love to be able to reduce that.
Let's talk about some of this. You mentioned some of those accomplishments. I'd like to talk about them a little more in depth. Let's start with full free kindergarten, full day kindergarten. Huge accomplishment, something that you've always wanted to see happen. Tell me about that, how that happened, and what do you think the impact will be?
So kindergarten was a real patchwork in our state, depending on where you lived. Some families got it free, they had it free in a few places, but by and large in Colorado, parents only had access to half-day kindergarten. I mean, they had to pick up their kids at 11:30 or noon, and they would have to pay $300, $400, even $500 a month for full day. That wasn't right for two reasons. One, that's a huge cost for young families, and two, many families couldn't afford it. So their kids went without full day kindergarten and really entered first grade without the advantage that families that could afford kindergarten or got it free had. So our proposal is a very simple one. Let's just fund kindergarten the same way we fund first grade, second grade, third grade, which means full day, which means 8 to 3 or whatever it is in your school district. And there was if something was easy, it would have been done already. So nothing's easy, Aaron, but we made that our priority. We built a very strong coalition talking about the benefits of full day kindergarten. First and foremost for the kids in achieving, in addressing and closing these achievement gaps based on income and based on race, but also for parents, saving. What do parents do with that $300 or $400 a month that they save? Benefits for the workforce and the economy, a lot of good business allies in the chamber because it frees up a second parent to return to work sooner if they'd like to. So a lot of benefits across the board, and in 99% of schools across the state, it started this year, and so that final 1% will come online in the next year or so.
How about the challenges of rural districts? What have you learned? What have you focused on? Certainly there's so many small rural school districts that just don't have sufficient funding to do what's necessary. How do we help them? And I know you got that started already with some legislation that passed.
Yeah, we did. We had an extra budget adjustment factor for our rural communities. They're also among the biggest beneficiaries from full day kindergarten because for many of them it made the difference between being able to offer it or not. But you still have this issue with the very small districts. If you only have 8 kindergartners in a year, you can't always justify the cost of a class. We certainly encourage districts to cooperate with one another through what we call BOCES in Colorado, which are an inter-district form of collaboration to provide services. And we also use the BEST program, which is our capital program in part funded by the marijuana funds, to address some of the lack of capital infrastructure funding in our poorer rural districts.
We'll take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment with Governor Jared Polis.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
Watch the Aaron Harper Show.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show.
I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch the Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're with Governor Jared Polis. Now, one of the things you come to this position with a really very in-depth background in K-12 education, having been on the State Board of Education, having founded a number of schools as well. Obviously, a lot of people who are concerned about the quality of education and the lack of success in K-12 education that we're having. When you look at the numbers and you don't see, none of us see the progress we want, what can be done to really improve the outcomes that we see in K-12 education? Because it seems like we spend a lot of money, obviously, in the state budget and local communities on K-12, but we don't seem to be getting the results every parent wants.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so, in my work before I was in Congress, I started and was superintendent of a charter school network in New America School, also worked with Academy of Urban Learning. I chaired bond and mill levy campaign. So I've been very active in this field for decades. And, the answer is there's no one answer, Aaron, and that's a frustrating part. But any parent knows this intuitively. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, but kids aren't all the same. They don't all learn the same. There's different ways of reaching different kids. Great teachers excel in offering that differentiated learning for their class, but we also have different kinds of specialized schools, and there's no one curriculum that works for everybody. But for some, it might be the expeditionary learning model. For others, it might be the Montessori model. For others, it might be more of a rigorous college preparatory model. We want to make sure that kids have the environment that allows them to thrive in our great state, and that we look at both ends, right? We talk a lot about K-12, but now let's talk about the early childhood piece, expanding preschool to make sure that kids are ready. And then let's talk about what comes after a diploma. High school diploma alone is not enough to have a good, high-paying job in a 21st century economy. So how do we make sure that, yes, college is more affordable, community college is more affordable, but for the kids that aren't going on to community college or college, how can they graduate high school with a real marketable skill or certificate, sometimes even an associate's degree, that allows them to have a good, upwardly mobile, middle-class job with their high school diploma and what comes along with it?
All right, you mentioned post-secondary school. What about some of the challenges? Certainly when you look at state funding of higher ed, historically, it's literally gone down every year. It used to be at something like a 50% level. Now it's at well under 10% of higher ed costs. What can we do to create some kind of stable funding mechanism for higher education and address the issue of rising tuition costs?
So we did a big step this last year. For the first time in recent history, we froze tuition at all of our institutions of higher education. Now we also know that that's not enough. So we're really looking at our Colorado Commission on Higher Education at holding the institutions accountable for delivering value, and that means reducing costs, eliminating excess expenditures, and passing those savings along to students, because they're two different things. Recognizing savings is important inherently, but making sure that students, current and future, are the beneficiary of those savings is of important role of the state for our public institutions of higher education.
All right, you mentioned briefly some of the healthcare issues. Tell me about the Office of Saving People Money. Great name, but how did you come up with that for starters?
Well, that's exactly what I said I wanted to do during the campaign. And of course, when I got elected, I said we need to have a laser-like focus on saving people money on healthcare. My running mate, Diane Primavera, herself, a 3-time cancer survivor, and had run the Susan B. Komen Foundation, really been very involved with healthcare. She's the head of the Office of Saving People Money on Healthcare.
As a state representative, by the way.
She's a former state representative.
Right, and she was my representative.
Oh, was she really?
Yeah.
She's wonderful,
yeah.
As you know her, and really brings a treasure of public and private sector experience and personal life experience, which we all have in healthcare. It affects everybody very intimately, whether it's your parents or yourself or your kids. So we have a laser-like focus on saving people money, and that means across the different agencies, right? Because state government's a big thing, 30,000 employees. We have agencies with names like HICPUF and Human Services and, other ones that touch it like Department of Corrections. Lots of areas around healthcare. How do we bring everybody together and make sure that we focus on reducing costs to people? And that means both healthy and sick people, right? it's not just if you have an illness that you're paying the high cost of healthcare. If you're healthy and you're insured, you're paying the cost of insurance. You see that probably every month, Aaron, right? You actually had a claim recently, I understand, right? I don't know.
I was amazed at what
Yeah.
the surgery on my shoulder cost.
And thankfully, you didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah,
right?
I ended up paying like 5% of
Yeah.
it.
But you had been paying for many years.
Sure.
So we want to save, again, even you need it when you need it, right? Healthcare. But we want to save people money on their insurance premiums. And so through a concept called reinsurance, which takes the very highest cost cases and puts them in a separate risk pool, we're able to reduce the cost in the individual market of insurance. And this is for next year. This is for the open enrollment period that starts November 1st of this year by an average of about over 18% in this state. So rates are going to come down for the first time since the individual market was created.
Huge change.
Really huge. It'll do two things. It'll make insurance affordable today for people who can't afford it and don't have it. And two, for people who are paying every month, it'll save them, 15, 20% of what they're paying, which can go to other things and invest in the local economy, shop in local stores, go out to local restaurants, or save for your kids' college or for retirement.
Let's talk about insulin.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your take on what the state is doing and what's really possible.
So two things on insulin. We capped out-of-pocket costs at $100 a month for diabetics. We had diabetics that were literally having to choose between their rent or their medical treatment. Some nationally, there's been these really horrible stories of people that have had to, out of economic necessity, skimp on their insulin, use half the recommended dose, et cetera, and sometimes with just tragic outcomes. We want to be a state where people who are diabetics can thrive and can contribute and can not have to worry about that pre-existing condition that affects them, but they can live fulfilling regular lives, and many of us have loved ones or family that are diabetic. So we capped out-of-pocket costs at $100 a month, and we authorized the Attorney General to investigate and directed them to look into the sort of price fixing and shenanigans around the insulin market. Because, Aaron, insulin, same technology that was there, in the 80s and the 70s. I mean, diabetics have had insulin for as long as we can remember, but prices, just in the last 20 years, have gone up close to 1,000% for insulin. There is no market reason for that, right? This is something happening that is co-opting the market for private gain. So how do we restore those market principles and competition, prevent the co-opting of IP and antitrust activities, and what role can Colorado play in creating an ordinary market in insulin?
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back in a moment with Governor Jared Polis.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
Safely stop fires around your home. Introducing the Fire Ice XT 20-ounce aerosol canister. Fire Ice XT is an eco-friendly water-based fire suppressant gel. Unlike a traditional fire extinguisher, Fire Ice XT is a highly effective, non-toxic firefighting agent that is easy and safe to use around your home, family, and pets. Available at Amazon.com or call 800-924-4874.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with Governor Polis. Jared, we've been talking about a number of different issues on the energy and environmental front. One of the key parts of your platform and something you've already begun to implement is the concept of taking the state all the way to 100% renewables in a few decades. Tell me about that plan and the actual roadmap to get there.
Well, we have a real air quality crisis in the metropolitan region. We've had over a dozen days with unhealthy air quality just this summer. It's about unhealthy outcomes for youth, for seniors, for athletes who train outside, and it's also something that increases healthcare costs and risk for everybody. I mean, it's higher asthma rates, it's higher cancer rates. So we've looked at all the major causes of pollutants. With regard to vehicles, a big one, traffic. We're looking at additional mass transit opportunities, but even now we're looking to make more electric vehicles available less expensively in the Colorado market. building out the charging infrastructure. Our goal is 6% electric vehicles by 2025. With regard to the extraction industry, with Senate Bill 181, we made sure we have some of the very best controls around emissions to improve our air quality. And then, of course, the one you mentioned, the grid. How can we accelerate the retirement of costly coal assets that are forcing all of us to pay more in electricity bills and grow out lower cost solar and wind infrastructure with Xcel and other power providers in the state?
So in regard to the extraction industry, certainly Colorado, when you look at the effective severance tax rate that Colorado has, it's relatively low compared to most other states. And you've seen, and there's been research done and stories recently published about a number of other states who have built up multi-billion-dollar rainy day funds or reserve funds using severance taxes. We give energy companies in certain parts of the state an ad valorem credit, which lowers the effective severance tax rate to sometimes about 1%. What should we do about that, if anything? And is there a path to start building up a significant fund for the state in difficult times?
We're looking at all of the loopholes in the tax code that benefit the well-connected or the lobbyists with the goal of finding what is realistic to reduce or phase out in order to reduce your income tax rate and the income tax rate of your viewers. So on a revenue neutral basis, if we can recapture $200 million that we're giving away in tax subsidies, that would allow for an income tax reduction of about 10 basis points. So, I mean, you'd be saving a lot of money on your taxes. You know, on every $100 in taxes you pay, you could save $5 to $10 on your state taxes if we can reduce some of these loopholes. So that's certainly our goal. That's met with the political reality of the well-connected and the lobbyists, and we're taking them on, and we'll see, hopefully we'll at least have some victories to show for it.
One of the key issues everybody seems to be concerned about is affordable housing. And you know, we've looked at this on the program multiple times. You know, the value of residential real estate in Colorado is approaching $1 trillion. If you had just 1/10 of housing in the state be affordable, you're looking at something on the order of, you know, 80, 90, $100 billion in value. Clearly, government entities don't have the resources to meet that challenge at the level it needs to be met. What are your thoughts about what we can do? How do we harness the private sector in a huge way to participate and build affordable housing?
Well, I'll have to start by digging through the archives and watching your shows that you've done on this topic, because I'm sure you have a lot of great ideas that you and your guests talked about. One of the things that we're looking at leveraging our state-owned lands. So the state has a broad portfolio of land. Some of it are state agencies. That means the Department of Transportation owns land, various Department of Natural Resources, but also the State Land Trust. So we're looking at how can we align the land, which we own, to work in public-private partnerships to have affordable housing. And so that's kind of the focus of what the state can bring to it. We have limited resources. We found some more. We increased the investment in affordable housing this year. But the biggest resource that we have as a state and can bring to bear to create more affordable housing for our residents is the land piece.
Homelessness, key issue. What can the state do to address it, especially given the numbers seem to be growing, not shrinking?
Homelessness is an enormous problem. Now, we have a partnership role with our cities that are on the forefront, to a lesser extent our counties, but it's Denver, it's Fort Collins, it's Boulder, it's Pueblo, it's Colorado Springs. So we encourage innovation at the local level, but we want to make sure that we can actually find a way to empower our problem solvers on the ground through meaningful partnerships to address the situation in their community. Mental health services, behavioral health is part of it. We assembled a behavioral health task force to reinvent from the ground up. We have representatives of those who work with the homeless on that community, substance abuse, and also housing costs. I mean, one of the very simple drivers of homelessness is housing costs too much. So it's all of those levers that we need to look at to really have an impact on promoting public safety and reducing the number of people who resort to our streets every night.
All right, transportation. We have a system that at the minimum needs, and just in terms of the backlog of maintenance, $9 billion. Some estimates to meet the real needs of the state are literally 2 or 3 times that. We have a gasoline tax that hasn't been raised since 1992. We have a population of drivers who want better roads, want better highways, but hate increasing the concept of increasing the gasoline tax. Why haven't we made a better case to voters that it makes sense to, for example, either adjust that for inflation or find some other resources to take on that task in a big way? And I know the state is adding significant dollars, but it seems like we're far away from that goal.
We are, and it was really interesting because the same election that I won by 12 points, the voters turned down 2 road funding initiatives, not one, but 2 different ones, and both overwhelmingly. I mean, they both got, they both lost by 10, 12 points. So, we're left with the challenge of how do people have their cake and eat it too? How do we fund roads and reduce traffic if voters also are rejecting the measures to do that? So it's back to the drawing board. I mean, again, I wasn't involved with those last proposals, but we're trying to read the tea leaves here and say clearly the voters want us to do more with what we have. That's why we invested several hundred million more in transportation this year. But even that several hundred million more sort of barely keeps things running in the scheduled projects. If we actually want to significantly reduce traffic, ultimately that'll be a conversation with the voters, the business community, and others to find a way to get to yes so that we have the resources we need to really reduce traffic in our state.
On the corrections front, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on corrections, jails, prisons in this state. What can we do to reduce recidivism and also decrease our costs?
That's our big focus in corrections, is reducing recidivism, because you have these return customers, which cost taxpayers a lot of money. And how can we make sure that when people are released, they served 6 months, they've served 10 years, how are they set up for success? Meaning they go to a job, they have a living situation, they got some sort of skill while they were in prison, and that they're not just back 3 months later for a crime of desperation or hooking up with their old buddies and causing trouble again. So that is really our focus within that, and that'll pay great dividends and savings for taxpayers as well.
All right, guns and violence, huge issue constantly in Colorado. Some progress made, obviously the red flag bill. What else can we do to address this issue? And is there a way to address it in a manner where we really see significant results? So
this is the new red flag law that Colorado put in, and I was even President Trump has now said he supports it. Is a concept where when somebody is a danger to themselves, I mean, and this happens so often across our state, it's tragic. When you're a parent, you have a 19-year-old, they're having a mental health crisis and they're saying threatening things, they have a weapon. There was no legal way for having a temporary order to remove that weapon. Short of involuntary commitment, which is usually a 24 or 48-hour hold, but the minute the person is released, they were back with their gun. So this provides a way that temporarily they lose access to their weapons, and then of course as they recover their health and facilities, they gain that access again. So it's a focus tool. It'll other states that have it, it'll probably only be used 100, 200 times or so a year in our state. But in all of those instances, it'll be times where it can prevent. People always focus on the mass shootings. I mean, rightfully so, they're horrific tragedies, but more often than not, Aaron, we're talking about a suicide here. And we're talking about when somebody is actively suicidal or having those thoughts, that there's a way that their loved ones can temporarily make them a little bit safer.
All right, on the topic's last future question, when you look back in 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be, what do you want to see in terms of what you accomplished?
Well, our big ones, Aaron, we want early childhood, full day kindergarten. That started this year. Saving people money on health care. We want people to pay less after 4 years than they do now. We're already starting that work. The pathway to cleaner air on 100% renewable energy, and hopefully reducing the income tax burden, especially on middle class families. So those are kind of some of our big goals, and there's a lot of other things in between that we want to accomplish as well. But we have an amazing state, Aaron, and to be the custodian of that state for a temporary period of time is just such an amazing honor. And as governor, I hope to leave our state a little bit better off and in an even more incredible place when my service is done.
All right, Jared, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, that was Governor Jared Polis. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.